It's high noon.
And welcome to episode number 7 of Foul Play. That's Fantasy Overwatch League Play. I am, as always, your host, DeathBlow, joined, as always, by Asmith, and occasionally, when he's feeling up to it, joined by TheBlevins, whose name I forgot to put on the video, but I figure you all already clearly know who he is anyways, so we're just going to run with it. And
likely story.
We can't be too nice to you today. Too many things have gone your way in the fantasy Overwatch world lately. So you're going to be...
I am an expert or a savant, as certain tweets have said.
As you have been a fan of saying for the past 20 minutes, yes, that is the case. But nonetheless, we're going to be jumping right into things here as we've got the first week of Stage 2 in the books. There's a new meta. It's a whole new world, gentlemen. A whole new world is what we're dealing with.
Fantastic point of view.
Yeah, 100% correct. Thank you for picking up where I left off. Speaking of which, Asmith, tell us how you left off this week after the fantasy action returns.
Look, after I went from fantasy god mode of like 3 unbeaten weeks in a row, this new meta has been a major oof. Let's just say major. I went 0-2 in the expert league, and I dropped some matches in the other leagues I was in. Look, I mean, you had guys like Bedozan, Chips, Kareev, and Shadowburn, who were owned in a lot of my leagues, all sit for unexplainable reasons. So all I can say is oof, rip.
Well,
next week.
After having to listen to your last two "How did you do this past week" segments, I don't hate that you had a bit of a rough week. So Blevins, why don't you take it away so you can balance it out and bring me back to angry a little bit here.
Yeah, so, well, I mean, you guys talked about it the last couple of weeks. I've been silently doing fine. I've been, crushing in both expert leagues the last few weeks. I've been winning in, well, actually, I haven't been doing that great in podcast battles, but this week I did the full clean sweep. I won in both expert leagues. I'm in first place or tied for first place in both expert leagues. And notably, I had middling success in my other undisclosed number of leagues. But notably in podcast battles, I won by a mere 10 points in podcast battle. So even though obviously it feels great to be undefeated in our new scoring format expert league and to be tied for first with Blaze and Bob in old scoring format expert league, winning by a mere 10 points, just this absolute dream crush just feels even better than being first in all the other leagues.
Cool story, scum. I don't want to hear any more of it, so I'm going to just grab the mic and run away with it now. So as for myself, I had overall a pretty bad week, but as far as the expert leagues go, I did pretty well. I was able to take down Mel in the old scoring format league. She's got a bit of a rough go. She's had a bit of a rough go. She's been at the bottom of the scoring list, but my point total was pretty good. So regardless of who my opponent was, I had a perfectly acceptable week there. Now the new scoring format, I may or may not have started Arc and Shadowburn against Taco. I also just want to point out across the board, Shadowburn is easily my most owned player. It's like, I think I'm in 7 leagues and like 5 of them have Shadowburn in them. It's disgusting how screwed I am going forward, but I can't wait to be furious that I don't get EQO on the waiver wire this week. But let's use this as a transition here and just move into kind of the big fantasy news of the week, what we took and what we need to react to more than anything, I think, here as fantasy owners. And we're going to start, I think, by order of importance, or how likely we think these are to really long-term impact things, and just begin with, as we talked about, EQO, the Israeli player who's been on the Philadelphia Fusion since the beginning and has been eligible in the sense that he's been 18 years old from the beginning, randomly decides to supplant Shadowburn's starting job and take over, play both maps. They don't lose a map the entire weekend. They crush. I mean, look great. EQO looks great. He looks like he's a stylistically different Genji from Shadowburn, but both of them look like phenomenal players, if I'm being honest. The one thing I will say here, and the reason I think we might see EQO keep this starting spot, is I've never really seen Shadowburn play the Soldier 76, and right now this week it really looks like Shadowburn 76. Soldier 76 is going to be a big part of the meta here. Whether you think it's going to stay that way or not, we'll talk more about that in a little while. But EQO is a little bit deeper of a hero pool when you start to look at some of the hit scan characters. A lot of teams have been playing Tracer and Soldier together on the field at the same time this week. So if for no other reason, EQO is a better Soldier and was better able to flex off of the Genji into what the team wanted for this stage. Asmith, do you think this is going to be something that I know you're going to talk about it even more later, but at the offset here, what do you think about EQO versus Shadowburn playtime going forward?
Right now, all I gotta say is all hail the Israeli god EQO, because what on earth is going on? Like, nobody's even seen this guy play. Like, I don't think I've ever seen him play, period.
Out of nowhere.
When he got picked up, I was just like, who is EQO? Like, I mean, he must be the best Israeli player on the planet because he's the only... All of a sudden, you see this upset, and I'm like, well, all my teams are ruined, first off. But also, like, I mean, they did dominant. They were dominant. Fusion went on a 4-0 tear on both games.
They had four Overwatch this week.
Yeah, like it was great. And if I'm the Fusion right now, I'm like, well, sorry, Shadowburn looks good. I mean, we won. Why fix what's not broken? So keep running them out there. But we have no idea what the coaches are thinking, what's going on. Who knows? Shadowburn could have been injured, for what we know. Like, there was absolutely zero reporting on what happened. So we have no idea. I mean, Shadowburn could be injured, and then all of a sudden he comes back, and we're like, oh, bye, EQO, trade bait.
I'll say this. Somebody showed me a screenshot of Name Twee saying something in Twitch chat that I've always thought EQO was our best player. Was how I read that message, and it was a little out of context. It was one, but this is very possibly a complete shift. This could be. I mean, we could be looking at Shadowburn on the trading block to go to another team. We could be looking at him riding the pine for the rest of the season. There's a lot of variety here. There's a huge shakeup to the fantasy world here, because the Philadelphia Fusion DPS were a core group that, regardless if the team was getting stomped, if they were stomping people, if they were in close games, it didn't matter. These guys were good. Blevins, I know you didn't get to see necessarily all the matches, but how much of Philly did you see this weekend, and what did you think of EQO?
Well, I saw a little bit of Philly this weekend, and even without seeing them, I think it seems like they're going to be potentially shifting to something more like what New York is doing. Like, New York has SBB, they have Libero, they have Pine, all very, very good players for the team. Now, they're not necessarily great players, and you guys did a great job of talking about that, as SBB was kind of one of the stage 1 feeders in terms of what you expected for him. Amazing player for the New York XL, best Tracer in the world. But for your fantasy roster, not so great. And I think it's possible that we're going to see Shadowburn and EQO kind of become those players potentially. I mean, now it is entirely possible that Philly trades away Shadowburn. I mean, he's obviously, like, the name alone is enough to take a team up. Like, what if Shadowburn went to the Shanghai Dragons and we saw Shadowburn undead DPS line, like, all of it with Gaguri at off tank, like, all of a sudden the Shanghai Dragons start looking really good. And
Shadowburn doesn't talk, so it won't matter that he doesn't speak Chinese.
It's not going to matter. In-game comms aren't going to matter. So anything could happen really for Shadowburn, but I think in terms of fantasy, it's a little risky here. EQO really seemed to be able to hold his own, and it seems like if they're going to want any amount of 76 in the map, they're going to play EQO, and if they want Genji on part of it, he can just play that too. So the Shadowburn ownership, it's looking like a big flop potentially for a lot of people.
It could be brutal, and I'll feel that more than most.
How ironic is it though that we just finally get Shadowburn in A? Like we finally get him in the States to play on good ping, and then he gets benched. I'm just saying, what is this?
It's the life of a shallow league. I mean, that's unfortunately what we've got. That makes it a little tough to feature all of the talent that this scene has to offer. We'll get more of that coming up soon, but we'll be getting more teams coming in soon, so that'll be less of a problem going forward in future seasons. Obviously, we're all looking forward to that, and we've talked about it a little in the pre-show too. We think fantasy on the overall, like you add in 4 teams to this league, the quality of the fantasy game would be a whole lot better, I think. So it's going to be really exciting to see that as well. But yeah, that might be a little bit me making excuses for drafting Shadowburn so much, but nonetheless,
it definitely wasn't wrong to do it.
EQO,
just,
to put a capper on this conversation, EQO is a little bit more vocal of a player, and that seemed to help Philadelphia Fusion. So I think there's a decent chance he might actually be a stabilizing force. We've talked ad nauseum about good Philly versus bad Philly in the early stages, and if a more vocal player and a player that's going to play more of a support complementary role to Carpe, who's just the most ridiculous fish on the planet Earth at playing this game, if he's going to be able to complement him more and support him more than try to be the carry himself, that might be exactly what this team needs. So anybody everywhere should be putting in trades for EQO. Unless you're in my league, then just let me have them. It's fine because I have Shadowburn. So I'm clearly doomed. Don't worry, Blevins, you're doing way too well in all your leagues on accident. You're not getting EQO anywhere. But yeah, so you have to pick him up, especially if you're a Shadowburn owner. You cannot, very likely, you cannot survive and expect to win your league if you go from losing your first round pick.
This is the ultimate term of handcuff.
Yes.
Like he's the ultimate handcuff.
Yeah,
like if you have one, the other one's playing. If not, the other one.
And so because of this, one of these weeks coming up, maybe at the end of the stage, something like that, we should have that conversation about handcuffs and who we should be targeting on our bench, things like that, to help protect ourselves from these ridiculous scenarios that are going to come up. They're unavoidable. They happen in literally every fantasy sport, and Overwatch won't be an exception, clearly. The next bit of news is we had, unfortunately, for our good buddy over there, Mr. Asmith, who second picked overall Bedosin in the second Expert League live draft that we did. Lost his starting job this week to Hagopwen. He did play a little bit, but it was like one map here and there. It was like really sparing. And honestly, Hago didn't look near as good as Bedosin did to me at any point. The one thing I will say here is I could very much so see Hago being the Sombra player for this team, coming in on those maps where they want to see the Sombra play. And hopefully, though, they do learn their lesson enough to take him out when it's just a Zen map and let Bedosin play. The team looked better overall with him in there. And listen, as we're seeing quickly here, we're seeing such a shakeup. Look, after 1 week, granted, it makes it a small sample size. It makes it easy for it to be a little crazy. But looking at the Stage 2 standings is mind-boggling. I despise it because I don't want to see my team any lower than where they're at in the main standings, which actually matter. But it is weird to look at, and I think we're gonna see that continue to change drastically as we continue on through the stage. I think it's going to be a very adaptive standings list throughout the duration of Stage 2. So I'm curious your thoughts. Let's start with Blevins this time. Hago or Bedosin, am I crazy here, or is there more to Hago that I'm not seeing?
I mean, it's just got to be the new meta, right? Like his hero pool probably lends more towards playing the heroes that they want in this new meta. I don't think necessarily that what we saw in week 1 is what we're going to see in week 5 of the stage, because I think the teams are still probably experimenting more. They probably, I mean, you think about how they play, they scrim against each other, but they're not going to give away full strats, especially if they're playing against each other in the stage. So I think maybe this week, maybe the week after, we're going to start to see more of what this meta is going to shape out to be. And it's also possible that the teams are really just trying to get those guys that were on the bench a little more time with some new heroes. Maybe they're better. I don't know. It's tough to pick one over the other here. Not being in on those meetings, it's going to be risky to own either, I think.
Well, Asmith, talk to me here as somebody who owns a guy. I don't own many of these London Spitfire players. The ones I own, I've been lucky. They're like Bird Ring and Gesture, I think, in a league I own as well. So I've been really lucky so far. The ones I've owned are the ones that are lock and load. Like they've traded away the competition for them. As somebody who owns one of these players that's sharing time, what are you doing with them? How are you planning going forward to make sure your team doesn't fall apart?
Look, I'll tell you what's crazy is Bedozin has been like the best, one of the best supports in the league, period, when he's playing. And then they bench him, and Hagopin has been average. Look, when we first started fantasy, I was preaching these London players, don't bank on any of them, don't trust them. Look, I gave it a couple weeks, and it seemed like Bedozin was trustable. I mean, then they use him to win the finals, and then all of a sudden they decide to take him out. I think this is my true thought process here. I think they don't like Nuss right now, and I think they're using Closer because Closer has a better hero pool than Nuss. Nuss seems to be not
Nuss
as
doesn't
great.
really have Lucio in his hero pool.
Yeah.
Closer's the one that definitely does. When you look at like the signature heroes of Nuss, it's like Anna, Zen, Mercy, and he just kind of slotted in correctly, kind of like how you saw Bonnie and Raucus for Houston, and we're probably not going to see a lot of that going forward. I think it's a similar situation there. So I think Closer's safe.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying is I think Closer and Hago, they were both on the Jisoo Busan team, and so I think they have better chemistry, and that might be the reason why they're going with them over Bedozin. Just my spitball, crazy out there thought here, but I don't know. It didn't make complete sense to me why they would do that. They looked bad when they did it, and honestly, this London team hasn't looked that great in this new meta. And I think you can lay that on Hagopin's feet. I mean, Bishop, if you can hear me right now, play Bedozin because your team's going to be better. The casters are saying it, everybody's saying it, and he's on my fantasy team. Like, for real, give me some points. Like, I've drafted your number 2 overall because he was tearing it up, and then you bench him. Stop it. Just stop it.
If you want him to listen to you, you might want to leave that last point out of your argument in the future. But nonetheless, they're not listening, and they're not going to pay any attention if they do ever hear what we say on this show anyways. So might as well go for full meme. Yeah, they 100% shouldn't. That's what makes it fun and great. But I 100% agree. Like they just look like a better team. And one thing I just want to point out, because it got this whole idea got shoved down my throat quite a bit, and I wasn't so sure that I bought into it, and it was that the Korean teams were hurt by this Mercy meta because they were like, it was the Western teams that were able to like be saved by the fact that they could just res people. New York didn't look like New York. New York is an excuse, a legitimately good excuse. They were down a player. So so we're still, let's call them undecided.
Sure.
Seoul looked slightly better, but they looked iffy against the San Francisco Shock. So I'm not 100% sold that they're just like locked and load, ready to go. This stage, all they needed was the meta to shift. And London looks goofy, and they're switching players a little bit too much, so they seem to have kind of bamboozled themselves some. I'm confident all these teams are going to get it back, and there's not going to be any long-term problems. But we're talking about, there's a match this week, New York versus Houston, that could very well decide number 1 in the standings. And that is number 1 in the standings when it's somebody in your division means a bye in the playoffs. Now, it's a little early to be worrying about the playoffs, but it's an example of how these it's an example of how these short-term issues can really affect people in the long term. So just something I wanted to point out, that maybe the Korean teams weren't just lock and load perfect because Mercy was leaving the meta. It wasn't necessarily a godsend for them. The last one I want to talk about is Custa got to start over Chipsogen. Chip seems sick. Somebody linked us a clip in the chat that I didn't get to watch because then you guys would have to hear the audio, and I'm assuming it's the audio that's important that I need to hear. But we don't have an official word from the team, so it looks like Chipsogen might have been sick. But I'll say this, Custa had a really, really strong week, and the Dallas Fuel are looking good. He looks strong in this meta. He looks strong with this team. If I'm Chips, sometimes illness, sickness, injury costs you your job. It's not ideal. It's not fair. But what's not fair by a larger margin is playing the worst player for your team, or the player that doesn't give you the best chance to win. So it's going to be interesting to see. I would personally stay away from Custa and Chips this week going forward. But Asmith, this is your team, so I want to hear what you have to say on this. What are you thinking between Custa and Chipsogen for the Dallas Fuel going forward?
I think Chips has better pure raw mechanics than Custa, but I do think the biggest issue is comms, and Custa brings a lot of comms to this, whereas Chips has very been open, and everybody knows that he's a not loud talkative guy. When he talks, he means it, but he doesn't talk a lot, and so you don't have nearly the same kind of comms that Custa has. But I don't know. It's a toss up for me. I think they're both very capable players, and I think you can plug and play either, and I think they'd be fine. I don't think, but playing one over the other is going to make as big of a difference as somebody like your tank role. But overall, I don't know, man. I like Chips, and I think he's a good player, but I do think Custa brings more comms to the team. So I'd lean towards Custa starting, but dang it, in one of those leagues, somebody decided to randomly start Custa, and I started Chips, and I was like, no way. And then the end of the week, so I don't know.
You got baited so hard, it's not even funny.
It was probably the thing of how dumb that is. It was probably me, but I don't think it was.
So
no, it wasn't.
I'll agree with what Asmith said there in that it's probably not a big difference for the Dallas Fuel or for the other players from a fantasy perspective which one of these guys gets the start. But Blevins, I want your opinion here. Who's it going to be? Is it going to be Chips or is it going to be Custa next week once everybody's healthy again?
I think that Dallas Fuel will probably go back to Chips. I don't think it's the right move. I just think Dallas has been falling back on the envious mantra for way too long. They've tried to run out just straight up old won a million games envious, and it just doesn't work in this league. And they seem to keep going back to it. Like Coco and Chips, they're just not. They're fine, but they just don't seem to have gotten that Overwatch League bump that a lot of these other players have had. And that's not necessarily saying that Custa has. I don't think Custa was at that level before, but honestly, if we look at it, like Custa played well, why take him out? He played well in week 1. They're working with him. He does bring those comms. Like, I don't see a reason to bring Chips back in. Like, why would you? Like, if it was any other player from any other team, why would you? Like, Custa just basically, in a way, won his starting spot, I think, from this week. Like, oh, he was sick. Let's put the guy back in. Well, okay, that's all well for your 6th grade basketball team, but like, if you're trying to actually win, like, let the guy who's doing better and who did great last week keep starting until you need to take him out.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned here, I think mechanically we know who the better player is, and it's Chipsogen. But who's better for the Dallas Fuel? In my mind right now, it's probably Custa because of the communication problems they've been having. I think he makes more sense to play and to start. You've got so much Moira in the meta right now. He's clearly been on top of that from the get-go. But I'll say this, Dallas Fuel fans, 4 wins in a row. You're getting loud again. So please play Chipsogen. Shut him up. I'm sick of it. They're done already. I'm back. I'm back being your rival. No more holding your hand to help you through the rough times, Dallas fans. I'm back.
One last thing I'll say about Chips versus Custa for fantasy is that Chips likes to just use his ults Custa just likes to use his ults at random times, so that's an extra 3 points for you because he's building up more ults.
That's true. It was a 3-point. That huge mistake that's going to be in our WTF mate video was a 3-point net positive play for fantasy owners. Thanks, Custa. We appreciate you having our back. That's going to kind of wrap.
Theory.
Sure.
I have one more theory.
Make it quick.
Well, okay, real quick. Swedish players are not doing well in Overwatch League in general. Just think about it for a second. All the Swedish players that I can think of right now that are in Overwatch League are not doing.
As long as the Finnish players are doing well, I'm perfectly comfortable with it. Let's move forward and talk about some leaders and feeders from this past week. There's some pretty big differences here, and I'm going to take the very first one. We're going to have the leaders from the tanks. My boy, he was my sleeper this past week. He's my sleeper again. He was Fissure with 268 points, was the #2 tank overall on the week. This is his first week with the Los Angeles Gladiators, already the #2 tank. I think this guy is going to be a lock and load, plug and play, instantly go starter. This is all off mechanical ability that he made such a high, such a big impact on the stat sheet and on the scoreboard and the kill feed. Fissure is a lock and load must start tank if you've got him. I know it flipped my 10-man team where I just literally, he remained my best option to play at tank through all of stage 1 because he might accidentally play over gesture. Now all of a sudden I flipped and am lock and load perfect, ready to go in that league. Asmith, talk to us about the next leader from the week 1 of stage 2 here.
Okay, well, I'm gonna take another one. I'm actually gonna take Fraggy. He put up 217 points, getting up for the 6th best tank on the week. Overall, he put up 50 more points than the total than he's ever put up so far. We kind of talked about this last week, or I guess it was last week, that this new system, the new meta, will do well for Fraggy because he actually gets to play Rectangle Man and swing his. And by Rectangle Man, I mean never use the rectangle and swing hammer all the time because that's Fraggy's game,
kind of a rectangle,
and he's
right?
great at it. So Fraggy's really done a lot better. And 6th overall tank. He's a startable tank this week, and I think this season going forward. Fraggy looks like a startable tank. I expect to see him on this leader list a couple more times.
I think you might be right there, but I think he might be on the other list a little bit as well, because he's not always going to get to 8-0 stomp every single week. This week miek be a really good counterpoint to it.
Go Fusion.
Go Fusion. High noon bump. They've got it.
Yeah, they sure do.
Blevins, take it away. Talk to us about the 3rd leader at tank for this week.
Yeah, 3rd leader here is Miro. Remember that player back 2 years ago that was like the greatest thing to ever meet Overwatch? Yeah, Miro.
You mean the one a week ago I said they should just bench for Kuki? Yeah, I think I remember that.
The one that I still think might get traded to Dallas. No.
Get out of here.
I'm done. Blevstradamus is dead on that one. I'm going to have to brew up a new one. I'm going to have to brew up a new one for this stage. But yeah, Miro's back. 255 points is good for number 2. It's worth noting that Gesture, I think, had more points than has ever been scored by a tank in a week without the playoffs at 315, which is insane. But
you're doing homework.
Well, I have
really good homework.
I don't know if it's actually true. It just looks true. But Miro, like you said, Death, was maybe not even going to play for Seoul, but it looks like Seoul maybe realized that you just play your stars when you have them. You've got Fleta, you've got Jaehong, you've got Miro, just play them. It also seems like we see Fraggy here, we see Miro, and I think we're gonna continue to see these aggressive EQO being an more aggressive player than Shadowburn. I think that this meta may be favoring more aggressive play. So when Miro being a very aggressive main tank is, I think, going to bode well for him. And I think it's going to bode well for the players who picked him up probably a little bit too early for stage 1 in their drafts, but I think it's going to start to pay off here. And I think he's going to be very good this stage.
One of our expert leagues, I picked him in the 9th or the 10th round, so I'm pretty happy about seeing this week happen.
That's
for
a really
sure.
really good pickup there.
Looking at the leaders for supports from the first week, the very first one, listen, I've been the one kind of waving the Gladiators flag a little bit, so I'm going to take Shaz right out of the gate. Yeah, more than most.
Man.
Shaz blew up this week, and I don't know 100% why. Maybe it was the presence of Fissure just being all over every DPS dealer on the opposite side here. But Shaz really had a standout performance. He was your number 1 overall support on the week with 252 points overall. This is something that I'm going to kind of, for the time being, view as a bit of an anomaly. But you can see this. I think I can buy this very, very easily. That adding an upgrade at the main tank position could help your flex supports tremendously. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Shaz. Man, that's hard to say. To see Shaz go
on the seashore.
To see him go from maybe a borderline top 10 support option to a borderline top 5 to top 3 option, I think is the kind of where the upside goes for a guy like Shaz, who I've always viewed as underrated. Asmith, talk to us about the support.
Hey, Shaz. One thing I will say, Shaz has actually every single week gotten better. He was he went 117, 167, 190, 228, 252. So I mean, if things hold the same, he's going to put up 270 points next week.
And he gets more protection and more help from Big Goose on the Lucio, way more appealing. Yeah. I think Shaz is a player that might be one of the most benefited by the new meta, but we'll have to see exactly how that plays out. Asmith, who do you got as a leader this week? All
right, next leader I got my boy Custa. Stepped in for Chips or has taken over for Chips. I'm not sure which. We just talked about it, but put up 247 points, 2nd best support overall this week. I mean, for somebody that hasn't played a whole lot, he sure stepped it up and played big. Winning 2 games also really helps. So, we kind of you put in notice, you look at the top guys, a lot of them, they've at least won one game, and some, a lot of top guys have won both games. So there are some anomalies here, but anyways, Custa just overall has done really well. I think whoever is going to be in this Dallas support, their support line, their main support's going to end up doing really well, or their flex support, I guess. Whoever is that position, I think, is going to do over well, because it looks like they have some new tank that actually will protect them. So,
Blevins, round out the leaders here, and I'll give the honorable mention afterwards.
Sure. So Boombox is our last one here, 213 points, which was good for the number 4 support overall. I think, Boombox has been a middling support in stage 1. Usually we're seeing Neptuno really kind of step up there for Fusion and be the better support in terms of fantasy points, at least. And Boombox really stepped up here. So definitely good to see that. Obviously, again, they got the high noon bump, but more seriously, they got the 4 Overwatch bump, just completely stomping teams. So, I don't know how much stock you want to put in Boombox, but I think he'll probably be pretty consistent going forward. And scoring more points than Neptuno, I think, is the bigger story here than maybe him being in the top 4.
Yeah, it's really starting to look like there's a bit of a shift here. Obviously, the new scoring system really favored the Mercies, like the points per res, things like that. But we're seeing a lot of these, flex supports that were disappointing or a little lackluster in the old meta. All of a sudden, they've got that peeling back from their Lucio counterpart that they're very, very used to, and it seems to help them quite a bit. So it's something to keep an eye on. Who knows exactly? This could be a small sample size, goofy first week of the new meta kind of situation, but for the time being, this even seems to bear out a little bit for the London supports, who make an honorable mention. Both of them, both Hago and Closer, have 199 points to tie themselves for the 6th overall support on the week. So a lot of really good support players here, and notably, we were very curious about how the Lucios would do. I think I was a little higher on them than most, saying that maybe the top ends would be very startable options, and that's not to toot my own horn a little bit, but toot. That seems to be a little bit exactly what it looks like over 1 week. We'll keep an eye on it, but overall, the higher skill supports are the ones that I see at the top of the list. So I think there might be some truth to it. We'll keep an eye on it for you and keep talking about it as the weeks go on. We'll also talk about it a little later in the episode as well. Let's move on to the DPS section. And I mean, this number 1 guy on the list here, Blevins, it would be weird not to let you talk about him. So let's hear it from you.
Yeah, it's SBB, man. Gotta have it. Gotta have myself some SB, or no, wait, what?
Yeah, SBB.
Yeah.
Leaders,
wow.
DPS.
I'm like doing research for other things right now. I swear I'm being productive here. Yeah, SBB, man, 262 points, number 2 DPS this week, just a few points behind Carpe. Look, he had 161 points in the first game, which would have alone still put him in the top 10 from just that game. Jake at number 11 had 157. So really a big week from SBB. And I mean, if you had to start him, it's one of those things where we've talked about, like the DPS for New York are not great fantasy owns because they share so much time, and until we get, like, it seems like they've really swapped up how they're going to be playing. We don't know how they're going to. We kind of had that formula down for stage 1, stage 2. Really kind of shows us something completely new. We saw a little bit more Pine than we normally would, and SBB getting 262 points is a good sign for SBB owners, and obviously going to be good for New York as well.
His worst game of the week was better than Fletta's best game of the week for fantasy purposes. Definitely something to keep an eye on. I don't think anybody, at least after the first couple of weeks, or first couple of weeks, was considering picking SBB over Fletta. So something to keep an eye on. And a very similar player here in a very similar position for Asmith's team. So Asmith, talk to us about the week Effect had.
Look, Effect had an amazing week. Put up 230 fantasy points. That's good enough for the 4th overall DPS, whereas he's the number 13th overall in the season. Yes, that does take into account the fact that he did miss 2 games completely because he was gone. He probably would be a top 10 overall in the season otherwise. Effect's going to be an always start as long as Dallas continues to play him, which I don't see why they wouldn't. Other than one map we've seen, he's played every single time. He's the consistent player on Dallas's team. He is the main player that will almost always be in, no questions asked, carry, do everything, will continue to be consistent. He doesn't have off games. And that's a good thing for effect owners. He put up 117 and 113 between the two games, literally 4 points difference. That's like 1 ult or 2, I guess, for DPS. So not that big of a difference there. You'll continue to see him in the top 5, top 3 every week, I venture to say, because Effect just is that good of a player. Regardless of whether Dallas does well, Effect will always do well.
Hard to argue with his just talking about his talent across the board. We'll see exactly how this pans out, but I don't think it's an accident that SBB and Effect are both on this list this week. They play a very similar style of Tracer in the sense that they're off almost independent of the entire rest of their team, harassing the opponent, relying on their health packs for healing, not so much their healers on their team, things like that. And on the overall, we've seen a lot fewer points scored this week than we have in the past, with a few exceptions from some tank players, things like that. Resurrections counted as points, so not seeing as many of those takes points off the board. That also brought players back onto the field to then die to feed points to the other players. So we're not seeing a lot of deaths happen that were happening a week ago. This is kind of like a 2 picks and then we're going to reset kind of a meta, as opposed to somebody died, well, res them and then run, just press W. Like that was kind of the last meta. So a very different style of play, I think, is going to help benefit these kind of off on your own, harassing the enemy Tracer players quite a bit. Something, again, we'll have to keep an eye on because of the small sample size. The last DPS player on the leaderboard here is EQO. We talked about him a lot. 218 points, the number 5 DPS. Who is this guy? We don't know. We need to see him a little bit more to find out. We need to be sure he's going to keep playing. With that said, can't be playing Shadowburn, and I think you can probably play EQO this week. I do feel, pretty confident. It's like 70-30 maybe that it's going to be EQO playing 2 maps this week as opposed to anything else. We'll have to wait and see. Moving on, I want to maybe go a little bit faster through the feeders if we can, gentlemen. Just try to pick up the pace a little bit, but let's look at the tanks first. I'm not going to take this first one because it hurts my heart. So if one of you guys could step up, Asmith, looked like you wanted to. Go ahead. I
should probably take.
I'll take Cool Matt. You got Cool Matt in here. He only put up 97 points. That gives him the 19th overall tank. I think you're going to see a trend here that Diva players have. Well, shoot, yeah, the highest Diva player was 8th on the list, and then so most of your good main tanks are your higher scores because you have the peel factor now. Diva's no longer diving, getting kills herself. She's more doing a lot of peeling as opposed to what she was doing earlier. So I venture to say we're going to continue to see Diva players on this feeding list.
Well, Blevins, there's one more. Do what I couldn't do and talk to us about the guy from your team that's on this list here.
It is. It's a double-edged sword. Well, it's not a double-edged sword, but it's good.
His indecision is exactly why I didn't want to talk about
Exactly. It's Meko. Now, Meko had 144 points, which is not a bad score. It is. Let me get to the right page here. He was number. He was number 14 overall, which is not great for Meko standards, but 144 points is really not anything to scoff at. I think the new meta changes how New York has to play. Obviously, they had Mono, one of their main tanks, playing support, which changed how they played. It's certainly 144 points is not a bad place to be. But the problem is that depending on when you did your draft, you probably paid a premium for Meko.
I did.
Yeah, you did for sure. I think I got him early before anyone knew who he was because I was just picking New York players because I'm, that
before
guy.
You knew who he was.
Before I knew who he was, yeah. No, I just had bare hands feeding me information about how good his players were. So I'm like, I'll just take Meko. But no, 144 points, not really bad. I wouldn't for basically any other player at the tank position, I wouldn't say that's a feed, but for Meko, It is.
For where he was, where he's been, and to continue this trend, I've got 2 different flex tanks to mention here, and I'm mentioning these ones because I want to, because it delights me that the Boston Uprising look more like the Boston Downfalling than they do Uprising. Kalios and Note here were 65. I'm sorry, Note and Kalios in that order were 65 and 58 points. That was good for the number 22 and the number 23 tanks. They split just enough time that absolutely neither of them is playable in fantasy right now. You just have to completely ignore them, take them out, and until we see one of them step up and put up consistent numbers over a consistent time frame, then we can consider it again. But in this meta, it really does look like these diva players are relying, and I don't even want to say they're playing poorly, right? Because if you watch the matchups for Houston and New York, you don't look at them and go, man, Cool Matt and Mecco were sure problems. But from a fantasy perspective, we don't care. The fact that they're playing defensive, hanging with their backline and defense matrixing them all day is just bad enough from a fantasy perspective for it to force us to change our opinions and to change our rankings on these guys. Try to bench your divas if you can. I don't know what else to tell you. Feeders on the support side of things. I'll lead us off. Jae-Hong, what are you doing, my man? I first pick, first round, like literally number 1 overall took you in one of my early drafts. What are you doing, my dude? 140 points, number 13 on the week. Listen, 140 points is passable, like we said with Mecco, but it's not what I paid for, and I don't feel like I'm getting that, and I don't know when it's going to start coming back. Jae-Hong, you got to play the Ana. If that's not enough, if going back to Ana Zen isn't enough, are you ever going to be a top 10 player? I don't know, but for the time being, I can't think of you as a top 10 fantasy option at the support position.
Yeah,
Thank you for letting.
Seem like a point scorer.
Yes, it does seem a little bit difficult to get points scored on that particular hero. Asmith, talk to me about another support feeder for the week.
Look, I've got a feeder, and I'm actually a little delighted to place this guy here. You got Raucus, put up 98 points. I'm glad to see a Houston player feeding right now. It just feels good, man. 98 points gave him 23rd overall support. Look, right now, he was the highest scoring support for Houston, which is kind of scary. The way they're splitting their team and how they get points right now, it's not through the supports. You got Boink and Bonnie in there. I just right now, Raucus may be playable. I think he might bounce back, but really at this point, if you have another option, which you probably do, play another player, because right now Houston supports just don't seem to be playable in fantasy. Stay away.
I do disagree slightly in the sense that I think Raucus gets back to that bottom end playable support, support player that he's been previously. I think he'll get back there. The guy's father just passed away, so a lot of the downtime in between the stage, he wasn't with the team. He was dealing with that. Also, he split some time.
Threw for 5 touchdowns after his dad died.
It's true, but nobody would have blamed him if he threw for 5 interceptions at the same time either. So it's something you can use to like prop up a player and say, this is just a phenomenal feat, but I don't like to take it away from him. And listen, when you watch the game, he played well. He had a fairly good thing. He missed some time with Bonnie and the bane of my existence playing that one map to start both matches this week. But, anyways, Raucus might be okay, but definitely, like you said, the support line for Houston looks a little iffy. Blevins, talk to us about the last feeder for supports.
Yeah, so I see this one here. I kind of want to audible, but I'll talk about this one here. It was Kareev. Just didn't play the first map, and he got 102 points. The second map, which is actually quite good, but it's because he played DPS, which was really weird considering they have Grim Reality on their team.
Yeah.
And actually Dogman tweeted out about how it was ridiculous that they were playing Kareev on DPS instead of Grim Reality. Of course, Grim Reality, being the awesome person that he is, was like, you just got to trust the process. So shout outs to Grim Reality. But it's hard for me to call that a feed considering the circumstances when we have Dahak right below him at 100 points, played both maps, got to play the hero that he's allegedly quite good at in Lucio, and just still kind of pooped out there. For him, 100 points on a support is really not where you want to be, especially when he finally gets to not play Mercy. So I'm almost calling a Dahak Kareev combo feed.
That's fair, and we had Dahak on the list originally and cut him just to get it to 3. The reason we put Kareev on here is because we wanted to point out that when you look at the overall points scored, if you're not following things as closely as the 3 of us are, you might go, oh, Kareev just had a down week. That's fine. I'm going to play him next week. You shouldn't be counting on Kareev playing 1 minute next week. He is a must bench, cannot play under any circumstances player going into the second week of the stage. And this was kind of our opportunity to highlight that and get that information to people. But Dahak, as was feeding a little bit. We expected him to be much better in the Lucio meta. He was not one of the players that really seemed to step up given the change. But let's move into the DPS categories here as we talk about the feeders. I got it, guys. Don't worry. Let's talk about Dreamcasper. 141 points to number 14 DPS on the week. Boston looks shaky. I've got a bit of a theory on Boston. Listen, they went out and got themselves all these blank slate players that we'd never really seen before because they were buried on Toronto's esports and not in the limelight. So these guys are, more than most, have a clean slate here. They've got no bad habits. They've got no good habits sort of thing, and the coaching staff is molding them. We saw them start last stage really shaky and really weak, and then the coaching staff molded them into the team that could play dive the best for that meta, right? And for the maps, everything. So what if we're looking at a team that needs to reset every single stage because they come into these maps in this meta brand new with nothing, blank slate, have to be molded, right? And they just look bad at the start of every stage and get better. We can't say that definitively going into this stage here. We can only react to what's in front of us, which is an exceedingly mediocre team that put up a fight on about 1 map, I think, on the weekend on the overall. It was definitely a rough weekend for them. But yeah, Dreamcasper was kind of one of those players in the first stage. He looked like a lock and load must play. 141 points doesn't kill you, but this was a guy that was in the top 5 to 10 most weeks at the end of the stage. Looked like he'd made a huge jump, and if you're counting on him, you're probably going to have to continue to do so, but you really want what I just said to be true. And I'm not 100% sure it is true, but we'll have to wait and see exactly what goes on with this team. It's funny, too, at the moment we all bought in, right? Like, I was given no alternative. I didn't have a choice. Right. I had to admit that Boston was the real deal. And instantly, they punish the entire community for it. Thanks, Boston. I never wanted to be right about you being good anyways, so I will take this and run with it. Blevins, I feel like we've gone Asmith second most of the time here. So, Blevins, start us off with the second DPS feeder.
Yeah, you know who I got to pick here? It's my boy, the Plupster here. Sub 100 points. That's never good. You don't want to, especially a player that... Well, I mean, if you picked him up for, if you drafted him in a later draft, you probably didn't pick him up too high. I did have him on one of my teams, but I still won.
By 10
number
points.
20, number 25 DPS on the week, and he had just 16 points versus Philly. He had fewer points than Kareev had when Kareev, the support player, played just 1 map. Or 1 match, I mean. So
Clockwork in his 1 map from each thing. 22 points, 32 points. That was how he did with 1 map. Tavik saw 4 maps against the Philadelphia Fusion. Put up 16 points.
Yeah, for what it's worth, that seems wrong, but boy,
it's
boy.
We triple checked. We triple checked because it really looks wrong, but it wasn't. It wasn't.
Boy, oh boy, that's not wrong. I mean, it's crazy that the Florida players who literally have guaranteed 100% playtime have just not done great.
Swedish players suck. What?
I'm not 100% sure what's crazier, that being true or Blevins continuing to pick them and pick them.
I'm going to be pick them this week, too.
I'm sure you will.
I don't want to be on the front page anymore.
You will never learn you are a glutton for, Florida Mayhem-based punishment. Yes. But anyways, let's move along. We've got some matchups to look at here, and we're going to try to pick up the pace on these.
We have one more DPS feeder.
Oh, Asmith, talk to us about the guy that I'm just realizing now you kind of sort of look like a little bit.
I really don't think that's accurate at all.
A little bit.
Okay.
I'm comparing it side by side.
What do you mean?
Okay, we'll go with Baby Bay here, which, I mean, he has dark hair and whatever. We'll just keep going with this. Baby Bay put up 108 points, 21 DPS overall. Look, he was having this weird thing where he was going like one good, one bad, one good, and I was like, all right, he's gonna hit this good one.
He's gonna hit his
No,
good.
he just went even further down. So, well, maybe this new meta is just not good for Baby Bay, and really just not good for the Shock in general because they looked shockingly bad. Oh,
Yeah.
Feels meme there.
I'm going to stand by it, get a beard, and Baby Bay, and I think you'd look pretty close to Asmith. But that will allow us to move into...
He's a good-looking guy.
Yeah, well, I didn't mean it as an insult. So moving on, let's look at the week 2 of stage 2 matchups that we have going forward. Blevins, you can mute your mic, take a break, step away if you need to. It's going to be a minute. But I'm going to start things off with the Atlantic Division here. The very first team is the Boston Uprising. They've got matchups against the New York Excelsior and the Florida Mayhem. They play 8 different maps on the week, and they do play on back-to-back days, Thursday and Friday. So, looking at that on the overall, you know, other than the second opponent being the Florida Mayhem, that's about as tough as it gets for the Boston Uprising. I do expect them to have a little bit of a continuation of their rough performance here. I don't expect this to be the week where they bounce back. Now, that's probably going to include a win over the Florida Mayhem here, so maybe all isn't lost.
Nope.
Blevins will never not pick Florida. But nonetheless, I will be picking the Boston Uprising, I think, in that one. And listen, it's going to be a little bit of a rough week here. I think you can continue to play the DPS players. I think Gamzu looked okay. I'm trying to remember exactly how he did on the week. Pretty rough week for him on the overall. Probably still a startable main tank, but maybe not that top 3 guy that it was looking like. Maybe consider him more of a top 10. Looking at the Florida Mayhem, they have matchups against the London Spitfire and the Boston Uprising. 5 maps here on the week, so that's not too bad. But they do play Thursday and Friday on the back-to-back as well. Listen, you're not playing any of these guys pretty much no matter what you do. Just stay away. The supports look like they might be doing a little bit better, but that's still not good enough. So just stay away from these guys for the time being. I would still probably rather own, say, a player than all the rest of them. Moving on, let's take a look at the Houston Outlaws. Excuse me one second here. I apologize. Talking for a while, I had to take a sip, so I apologize for that. But the Houston Outlaws have matchups against the Philadelphia Fusion and the New York Excelsior. These are 6 different maps for the week, and they play on Thursday and Saturday, so they do have a day off in between. Overall, not too many negatives to come out of here other than New York is going to be one heck of a matchup, assuming Arc is available. I do think Houston has a bit of an edge if Arc isn't available, and New York is forced to play one of their main tanks as a support player again. If you're a Cool Mat owner wondering how you can possibly use him, they're only going to be playing on Kings Row once this weekend, so a little bit less time off for Cool Mat should help him. I can't imagine that Hollywood's going to prove to be a Zarya map. There's just too much high ground that you're going to want a Diva to help you attack. So I do expect them to go that route. Maybe they want to play triple tank or something like that, but it's not going to mean Cool Mat out, I don't think. Looking forward, like we've talked about, you know, Raucus is a maybe stardom support player. The DPSs are very solid startable options, but still, you know, performing well in the meta, but maybe not to their stage 1 fantasy performance that we've seen. You can continue to use them. I think Jake's going to continue to just get better and better as he gets solidified into that tracer role. I was very impressed with him this weekend. Can't wait to see him bury SBB into the ground as I look at Blevins to see what his reaction is. Just statement like that.
No, get out of here. You know that's not going to happen. He's going to get dumpstered.
I know that it's got a chance to happen, and that's enough for me that I want to watch it. So, moving on, let's talk about the London Spitfire matchups against the Florida Mayhem and the Philadelphia Fusion. 7 maps on the week, Thursday and Saturday, so they do have the day off. Run away from everybody that's not Gesture, Prophet, or Bird Ring. Those 3 are lock and load must starts. The rest of them, I'm terrified. If I have to play a London support player, it's closer, and it's not that close. Is that a good pun? I don't know. I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it. I don't care. New York Excelsior is the next team. Matchups against Boston and Houston. Kind of a close match, and what I'm assuming is probably going to be a bit brutal here as they go against Boston, who had a rough time against another top team in the Houston Outlaws this last week. I just expect their problems to continue for Boston, and New York players should benefit from that. And then we might very easily see a 5-map set against Houston. So I'm very happy to play any and all New York players in their roles that I would normally play them. The exceptions, of course, are maybe Meko. I'm still adjusting my expectations on him, but I still want to see him play on that role in this meta with his support players before I panic too much on Meko. I'm still willing to play him.
144 points is still playable. It's just you don't want to have. I mean, if you have him, you still have to play him. You just don't want to have picked him up as early as most people did.
Right. And the Philadelphia Fusion are the last team here for the Atlantic Division. Listen, who knows what to make of these guys? But like last stage, if you've got a support player and his name's not Shadowburn, I'm sorry, a DPS player and his name's not Shadowburn, play him. I'm playing EQO, and you have to play Carpe. He's probably the best DPS for fantasy purposes as it looks right now for this stage. And listen, Boombox, if you're in a pinch, if you've been looking at your roster all stage 1 and you haven't had a good support, make a move for Boombox. I think you can play him. I'm fine to play Fraggy if I need him, but for the most part, this is going to be a much harder week for Philadelphia, and I'm just kind of hanging back just a little bit. I'm willing to buy in to an extent on a lot of their players and the performance they had in the first week, just not 100%. Asmith, walk us through the Pacific Division here.
Look, we're going to lead it off with my boys, the Dallas FOWL here. They've got a much harder week than they did last week. They play Soul and Valiant. Good news is they only have 5 maps they need to prepare for, which could really help them out here. I am not sold whether Custo or Chips will be starting, so if you have another option other than those two, I'd probably run them out. However, and here's the other problem here is DPS. I'm not sure where we're going to go. Effect, you start Effect, but other than that, I don't know. So, and Tank, we're still not sure if it's going to be XQC, Taimu, or even Coco. It could be any of the 3. I like XQC to take that spot, but we'll see what happens. But this could, I venture to say, with Dallas looking better, and Valiant looking worse, I think Dallas actually has a legitimate chance to beat Valiant here. And Soul, we'll see what happens. Soul hasn't looked great either. I don't think the 2 teams they're playing are at complete top tier teams, and I think these are a chance for FOWL to jump up in the rankings here, and we'll see what happens, but I think they're going to be good for fantasy points.
You're not sold on them, but maybe you will be after Wednesday. No regrets. No regrets. Move on, gentlemen.
I literally sold on FOWL. Look at the shirt. They literally sold me. Okay, I'm going to go with Gladiators next here. They've got Shanghai and Seoul here. It looks like one's going to be an easy clap, and the other one they might get easily clapped. Oh, you like that pun? No. 7 maps here. Look,
I don't even think that's a pun. Is that a pun?
No, I don't know what it is. We're just going with it.
I'm just booing everything at this point. I think I'm winning.
Boo this man. All right. Look, Gladiators, it's going to be one good one not as good one. I think it still could be close, but as we saw against FOWL, Gladiators didn't look that good. Soul really, I mean, Fisher added to the team, but I think Gladiators needed their trade to really become a great team. We'll see. Their DPS duo, their trio is still, I have no idea. You're not going to get full maps out of any of them.
Yeah, just like stop taking Surefour out, and maybe you'll be just fine.
But they could, but they're not going to because they're hard-headed and don't believe in that.
They would prefer to just drop maps randomly, like it'll help.
Yeah, I mean they like losing apparently. Also, Fisher, start Fisher. He's going to be one of the best tanks in the league. He's going to be a top 5 tank period all the time, I think. All right, moving on to the Valiant. Look, they've got San Francisco and Dallas. I think this is a beneficial matchup for Valiant. They don't have any of the top tier teams they're going to play against. I think, and they do have 7 maps to prepare for, which is a little more, but it's not quite the full 8. But you'll see, San Francisco has just looked really, really weak. And I think they're going to get a good win there. And who knows what's going to happen with Dallas. I actually think they're going to lose here. So but I don't know what Kareev's going to be doing. So bench Kareev because he may be playing DPS. He could be playing support. I don't know. Verbo hasn't looked great. Unko's looked all right. They looked average this week for fantasy purposes. None of their players other than Fate. Yeah, other than Fate were any good. So NV hasn't looked as good.
For what it's worth, if Kareev repeated his performance that he did on DPS and played both maps like that, he would have been the number 6 overall support. So
correct, but I just don't think he's,
DPS
I just don't think they're going to run him.
If he would have played DPS for 8 maps, he would have been the number 6 support. That's the kind of analysis you only get here on Foul Play, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, if he would have been playing DPS but getting extra points because he's technically a support, he would have been 6.
He would have been baller. I mean, let's just,
let's see the Overwatch League stats team put that one up.
Make a graphic from that.
Yeah.
Good luck, Captain Planet.
All right, next team, San Francisco Shock. They play Valiant and Dragons. So, hey, this might be one of their better lineups here. I think they're actually going to get a win this stage here against Dragons. But as bad as the Shock have looked, and the Dragons haven't looked absolutely terrible, this might be a chance. I'm just saying, there's a chance here. Shock don't. Other than Sleepy, I just don't see any of their players really being of value to play right now. If you have Baby Bay, you probably have to roll him out. So good luck with that one because he just hasn't looked great the last 2 weeks. So we'll see. Maybe he'll start his roller coaster ride again and we'll have a good Baby Bay again.
The one thing I would say there is Nomi looked borderline if you're in a tough spot. He was the number 11 tank on the week.
Yeah,
so Nomi was okay. Better than Meko, better than Gamzu, wouldn't have been better than XQC had he played 2 maps. Better than Envy, better than Cool Matt, better than most of the Diva players that you were looking at, which to me was a little bit surprising.
That's true. And it depends on the league you're running out too, because most leagues you're only going to start 1 tank. Mm-hmm. And you're probably going to start one of the top 8 tanks if you have them, unless you just have somebody who has 2 really good tanks. So that's kind of how I compare somebody to like a tier 1 tank, or even tier 2. Next team is Seoul. They've got Gladiators in Dallas, which in theory, these are really good matchups for them. This could be a really good get right week for Seoul. Mm-hmm. I like to play all their players. They only have 5 maps to prepare for as well. Fleta is going to do well. Miro seems like he's going to be the guy, and he's going to do well. I think Jaehong is going to ride the boat here. Jaehong is going to do well. Toby's going to do well. Seoul Dynasty players are going to do well this week. Plug and play the ones that you know are going to start. I still hold off with Bunny and Munchkin because we're still not sure what they're doing. But seems like they've gotten the Fleta thing down, and they're just going to play Fleta every week. Thank goodness they finally got something right.
For now.
For now, we'll see what happens.
For now,
we'll see what happens. All right, and last team here is the Shanghai Dragons. Don't get me wrong here, but I think this might be the week they get a win.
This is their best week.
Hear me out. They got Gladiators in San Francisco here. They prepare for 6 maps. They could get a win this week. Mm-hmm. They could. I don't think they will, but they could. And this is a real chance. And if you're really leaning on the edge, I think this is a week to play some San Francisco or some Shanghai players. Mm-hmm. I think some Shanghai players are going to end up doing well, which could transition us really well into sleepers.
Yeah, there's a couple of them in the sleepers, so we'll just jump straight in. But the one thing I took away from Asmith's group of teams that he talked about there is that, my friend, you are, and I love it, and I don't even disagree, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, but you are drinking the Kool-Aid, my friend. You have the Dallas Fuel-Aid, if you will. Oh. You are drinking it.
The four wins that we've had recently.
Yes.
The fact that we're looking better and better.
Let's look at who they were. No doubt you're looking better and better. I'm just saying you're picking them 2-0 against Seoul and Valiant. I'm not quite there. I think they've got a real chance against Valiant.
There's a good chance.
I think one win would be a great performance from the Dallas Fuel this week. Take down the LA Valiant, and I think they're making that progress they need to be making. They're making strides, getting better and better. That's what I want to see. But I love that you're there because it makes the heartache better on Wednesday for me. But
one last comment about that. You said Dallas Fuel Aid when clearly it's the Dallas G Fuel. Today's episode brought to you.
I like Fuel Aid. I like Fuel Aid more. But moving on, let's talk about the sleepers here. Listen, Asmith, you had the segue for us. You won here. Your sleeper last week was better than mine. Bunny outscored Tank Moo. So talk to me about your sleeper of the week this week.
Sleeper of the week. I'm not going for the win here, but I'm going for the great sleeper of the week. And if I ever have a chance to pick a Shanghai Dragons player, I'm going to pick one because I just feel bad for them. And they need to get picked for something that's not bad. At Dia, I'm pulling for you, man. You are the sleeper of the week. I actually think Dia is going to put up some respectable numbers. He was the number 13th overall DPS this week. And if you look at the schedule he has this upcoming week is even better for him. I think he's got a potential to sneak into top 10 if he plays really well. So hang it out there, but Dia actually has a chance to do really well this week. And if you've got him and you have some options who are like randomly got benched and you're like, I have Shadowburn and I don't know what to do, play Dia. He could be an option.
Well, for my own here, since I got second place in the sleeper conversation since playing a DPS player playing tank for me does better than the Blevins, who doesn't show up for 2 episodes in a row. That means I get to go second. And since Asmith and the Blevins have done such a good job of picking, good, valuable sleepers that will really help the listeners in trying to improve their lineups this week, I'm going to cheat and try to win at which sleeper scored the most points. And I'm going to take EQO because he's only played one week so far. He can't possibly be inside the top 20 of DPS dealers, so he's an eligible sleeper for me to pick. So I'm going to cheat, pick the guy that I think is going to start and probably just win this little mini contest here, but don't need to go too in-depth an analysis on him since we covered it earlier. Blevins, who do you got for a sleeper?
I got Undead. Basically the same argument here as Asmith with Dia, but I feel like Dia has had lower lows and maybe arguably higher highs. I mean, he has more points. He had more points this week than Undead, but I think overall Undead is probably higher. I don't know. I feel like Undead kind of won the spot over Dia going into the preseason. We thought Dia was going to be better, but I think Undead ended up being a little bit higher up. And with the new players coming in, I think we'll see one of them play, and maybe one of them gets swapped out more. And I don't know. I'm putting my bets on Undead, mostly because I own him more than Dia in my leagues.
Well, this is definitely a week you guys can choose to use them. The one thing I will say is you guys will either be right and have helped a lot of people today, or Fissure will be well fed and at the top of the point scorers for the tanks again this week. One of them will be true. Not sure which one yet. However, moving into my tank sleeper of the week, I won. I had Fissure last week over Zumba. I'm rolling Fissure out there again because it's still cheating, and I can. So I'm going to play him. Listen, this guy, just to underline, this guy, you have to be playing him, right? Like, it was 1 week. I know it's a small sample size. He's not giving that job back to iRemix. He is that as good as he looked. He's going to have that big of an impact on the kill feed, and the team's only going to get better around him. There's no way Fissure was fully ensconced in their strategies and in their player meetings, everything like that. This guy's only going to have more of an impact as time goes on. You 150% have to be playing Fissure if you have him on your team.
Yeah, the good news is Fissure speaks English too, like good English.
Yeah, I watched him stream a little bit. I can understand him just fine. I think he's going to be quick to get back into it.
Exactly. I'm going to go next and take over the spot here. Look, I like Janice here. Janice is now apparently the main tank because guess what? Mano is now a support player. Who knew? So if Arc isn't better, I think Janice is a must start on tank. If Arc does get better and we see him play, then you're just really hurt yourself. So I would really stay up to date on Twitter, really scope it out before the game starts. But I like, I don't know. We'll see. I didn't get as much hope from that Ark will play next week, but we don't have good enough reporting to tell us whether or not they are going to play. So we just lend it to Twitter and maybe their streams and see if maybe they play.
Yeah, Ark tweeted and said, wrist injury, got in an accident, hope I get better soon. That's not like a confident player saying to me, it's just a week off, I'll be back next week. He might be, we don't know. But he didn't seem super, super confident from the last bit we've had from him. It's also worth noting he speaks a decent amount of English, but not great. So it could have just not been the, you know what I mean? It's really hard to try to read into what he said based off of, you know, his tone when he's speaking his second language. So be a little careful about that. And like A. Smith said, just be as all over Twitter and the news as you possibly can about this to get as much information as you can, like 1 hour before Wednesday when the lineups lock up.
Yeah. I can't buy into Janus because he feeds way too much and it just makes me so mad watching the games.
But now he gets more maps to feed on because he's not subbing out with mono.
It just boils my blood when he just dives in his Winston, immediately dies, and then they have to reset again. He just okay.
Who's your sleeper of the week, Blevins?
My sleeper here is Kalios. It's basically the exact opposite analysis for Fissure. He is absolutely not a must start, but I think he is a good player to pick up right now. We even talked about earlier, Note and Kalios can't play him this week, and I'm fine with that. So I'm kind of throwing this away in terms of winning the mini contest, and I'm fine with that. But I think right now is a good spot to pick up Kalios. A lot of owners of Kalios probably aren't playing him. You can probably get him real cheap. And I think he has a really high ceiling. Look, if Zarya starts to see a lot of play, he is a very good Zarya, and I think we will we'll see him have a really high ceiling in terms of points he can score. If we start to see, and also Boston had a really, really bad week. So if Boston can pick back up, and if Zarya is a part of that equation, I think Kalios, the sky's the limit. I think he could be a top 5 easily in a given week for tanks. If that happens, and if not, you know, don't spend too much on him. But I think he's a good pickup. He's a good sleeper for this week, or to pick up this week, not to play this week.
Gotcha. So you're changing the rules slightly, but I like it anyways.
I'm not changing the rules.
You're throwing. It's fine.
I'm throwing for the benefit of the viewers.
Ban for throwing.
I'm fairly certain. I'm fairly certain what this means is that Blevins will not be here next week. It'll be back to a 2-man show. But let's move.
Get as many fans as possible. Not win.
Let's move right along into the support sleepers of the week. A. Smith won last week, picking Harry Hook over Boink. So start us off here, A. Smith.
Look, since you were cheating earlier, I'm just gonna have to take your lead here. I'm gonna pick Harry Hook again. He still hasn't gotten into that top 15. He is just outside of it. But Harry Hook looked great. Put up 186 points last week. I venture to say he's gonna put up similar numbers this week. And these games could be even closer. We'll see. Harry Hook looks good, and he looks like he's firmly planted in this, seeing as we don't have another Lucio player. So, and he does well on DPS too. Harry has good aim. So, having good aim does really well when Harry Hook.
All right, so that's going to move us along here, and since I got in second place, again, no matter how bad you do, it's better than not showing up. So even if I was negative, I would still be going second here.
I think if you were negative, I would have gone second.
All right, but not showing up is negative 50 points across the board.
Fine.
So if my player is ever negative 50 or more, then it will put you above me after not showing up. But moving on here, listen, I'm going to take Closer. I don't think there's anybody else to really challenge this guy for the Lucio spot. Of all the players that I'm not very confident in, I'm the least confident in Closer, if that makes any sense. I'm pretty sure it doesn't, but you get what I'm trying to say. If you're hurting at support, pick this guy up, play him right away. You'll do just fine. Blevins taken away with our last sleeper of the week.
Yeah, like I said before when we were talking about the Dallas Fuel, Custa should play over Chips here. I think it's better for the Fuel. I think once the Fuel realize that Envy is not what it once was, they're gonna move to the new wave, and I think. I think you should play Custa this week because he did so well last week, and if he flops, okay. If he does great, he's got a starting spot, and I think that's a good place to be.
I agree with that. I would be a little nervous. Like, I'd have to be pretty desperate, I think, to go with that option. But there's a lot of people in, like, Hail Mary situations, especially in old scoring format leagues. And I think moves like this in old scoring format, you want to be even riskier with these spots. Because what's going to happen? Is he going to do, like, 0? And, like, your supports could easily be negative in old scoring. So it's not that bad.
It's good for a support to have 0.
So definitely something to keep an eye on. Guys, I want to go through these Douse the Flames really, really quick. We're running a little light on time. We don't need to go crazy on analysis on these because we do have a lot of mailbag questions because our fans are just absolutely the best. But let's start off with DPS Douse the Flames. I'm not even going to throw to each of you guys. Just pick it up after everybody stops. Asmith, lead us off.
EQO. I don't buy into the hype that is EQO. I don't buy into it.
Yeah, SBB here for me. Look, we're not sure. We're not sure what New York is going to be doing with their DPS. They could be completely different than last week. We need more data to know how much SBB time we're going to be seeing.
I'm going to go with AKM here. Listen, it's nothing to do with the guy's skill. We saw it this past week. He's phenomenal. When he gets the chance to play Soldier, he's the best bet on Soldier for that team. I'm just not sold on Soldier being a big part of this meta going forward. He'll clearly be a part of it, but I think it was very apparent that a lot of these teams haven't figured out the meta yet, and they're still trying things out. And Soldier's that perfect wishy-washy in the middle kind of character that just puts on value and has a good performance, whether it's a short-range fight, a long-range fight. Like, he's just a safe hero pick, and I think that might have led to AKM seeing the stage a little bit more. I'm still, in my head, leaning Rascal and Effect over AKM and Effect, but we'll see. We never know. I'm just saying wait another week and see what happens here with AKM. But pick him up, and I wasn't saying that last week. Asmith, move us on into the takes.
Look, I'll take Fraggy here. He put up 217 points, and I just don't know if that's sustainable for him. I think 180, 170 is probably closer to his range. Therefore, I think he's going to have a little drop off here. And they have a pretty stinking tough week this week. They are playing Houston and London, and I think those are two games where he might end up feeding a lot more. So don't expect as much from Fraggy this week, but I think he's overall still going to be good.
All right, TheBlevins, you're next, but I need you to talk about it like this the entire time. You just need to, as fast as you possibly can, do the whole thing.
Yeah, so definitely Douse the Flames on XQC, boys, and definitely he had a really good map. One match though, that's not good enough to play. You need to have him for 2 for sure. His spot is not secured. We don't know. It's very possible that maybe next week we reignite those flames, but this week it's a dousing on XQC.
That went
Golden Smoke, my doggies.
Yeah, that went way better than I thought it would. I'm glad I thought to make you do that.
That's the first time I've ever done any sort of XQC impression, and it was
really good.
I just let myself go. So
considering I'd never heard it before, I figured that was the first time.
Never done it.
It was pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. Listen,
add that to the repertoire.
My Douse the Flames is gonna be for Miro here. I'm just like there's still issues on Soul, right? It was shocking to me what happened at the start of that San Francisco shock. And it didn't even intend that pun. Didn't even mean that one. It's just that one's going to happen. Take your booze and shove them, because you guys are going to do that one on accident too. Shocking is too commonly used of a phrase for it not to happen. But listen, it was a little alarming, I thought, how San Francisco was able to start off that match. Watching it, I went, oh man, I think San Francisco is about to win this one. That was literally what I was thinking after that first map.
I was hoping. What? Oh.
I was a little hoping for it too. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. But I'm just not quite there on Miro. I'm willing to play him if I'm tank needy, but I'm not all in on him, super excited about it yet. I'm in fantasy, generally speaking, I make players prove it multiple weeks in a row before I buy in all the way. So, Miro's in that if I'm desperate situation, or if I'm needy, maybe not desperate, that's the wrong word. He's not on the I'm locked and loaded, ready to go. 1 week isn't enough of a track record to make me plug somebody in fantasy. Moving along, supports. Asmith, lead us off.
Look, this support this week, I'm gonna Douse the Flames on his Mano.
But Asmith, he's a tank in the system.
No, he's a support. Apparently, I have no idea what's going on over there, because apparently we don't have enough players to run multiple supports. Hey, this is a good reason right now for me talking to everybody. Every Overwatch League team should have 2 people in each position, period.
Yeah. Also,
Douse the Flames.
you should have 12. And if you don't,
Yes.
at the end of the assigning period, we will step through every single one of those teams on the flagship show and give them an individual shame bell. And I honestly think New York and Houston will 100% be on that list. I think they're both going to stop at like 11 or 10. Houston right now is at 11, and we will shame our own teams if they don't fill out and grab that 12th player. But Blevins, move us along here.
Yeah, so closer.
Closer.
For the closer, whatever you want to call it. It's spelled the same. I don't
Always
know.
be closer.
Always be closer. When Asmith asked me, like, gave me some options here for Douse the Flames, and he said, "Do you want closer or someone else?" I'm like, I literally didn't know that closer was a player in the Overwatch League until this week. And I'm willing to admit that. Who is this guy? I don't think he saw any play before, or if he did, it was very middling. I can't bet on that. Now, it's possible that he's going to be really good, and it's possible that you want to pick this guy up but not play him, but I don't think you want to play him super confidently that you're going to get a ton of points this week.
Well, for not knowing that he was in the Overwatch League, you're going to have to sit through a shame bell.
That's fine.
Mostly because I'm happy that I remembered I can do drops in the middle of an episode and threw one in because I'm starting to finally get a little comfortable with the hosting duties here. Listen, my Douse the Flames for support is going to be Hago. Listen, I don't think he's better than Badosin. I think if the team is got their head on straight, we're going to see less of Hago going forward. And listen, he might be the Sombra player, which could be a pretty good point scorer position for support players, but he's not going to play enough if they have their head on straight. And I don't want to bet on the team being crazy enough to keep doing what's not working for them, at least as well as stage 1 showed. I don't know. Closer should be in. Hago should not be in full time. Yeah, so put Badosin back in, please, and let this Douse the Flames be correct. But that's going to move us along and let us start to talk about the mailbag here a little bit. Big thanks to everybody who sent us in questions. Obviously, the first week, there were so many twists and turns here. We're not even going to be going through all of the questions that were asked because many of them were about EQO, and we've already gone at length about him earlier, but we're going to go down the ones that we have here. We have enough of them. We're not going to all answer them, so Blevins, if you're not super comfortable answering one or anything like that, you can ask one of us for assistance. But let's send the first one over to Asmith. Pauhai wants to know, he's got a meta question. He wants to know, how should we value support players in the new meta?
Well, support players are still good. They're not as good. I think support players on the total are not still crazy top players. Jonak is an example of that. He put up 224 points this week, whereas he was putting close to 300 every week. You're going to see a little downtick, but flex supports seem to be the better support. You have 7, 8 flex supports over before you start seeing Lucio players, and your main supports are just below that, which your top 5, 6 Lucio main supports are going to still be playable options, but supports on the total, go with your top tier flex supports, and then your top tier Lucio main supports, and then your middling flex supports. That's kind of how I have it in my head mentally.
Blevins, you physically sent in this question for us, so why don't you read it and ask me the question? Yeah,
I want to know. I have Taimu on my team. I picked him up first round in the original Expert League draft. He now is maybe playing tank. I don't know. Should I trade Taimu or drop Taimu and pick up ACAM?
I'm going to say no, and it's close. It's close. You can, by all means, feel free to throw out my advice and do the exact opposite, because it is that close. But I'm holding Taimu for just a little while longer. Listen, I don't think this main tank swap makes any sense. I don't think it makes sense for Taimu's career. I don't think it makes sense for the Dallas FOWL. I think they already have 2 main tanks, whether or not Coco's been disappointing or not. I think you only need him to be on the bench and occasionally filling in for XQC. So I think they're kind of making this transition even on the off chance XQC implodes and gets himself suspended the rest of the year, right?
It's very viable.
It's very possible, and if that happens, Taimu will be more valuable as the lock and load, probably automatic starter for main tank for this team. And if it doesn't happen, I think Taimu is going to transition back to DPS role and very possibly make it so that neither him, AKM, or Rascal, any of them are any valuable because they're constantly switching out too much. I think there's too many reasons this could go wrong, but at the end of the day, I think the highest upside option here is that Taimu makes his way back to the starting role for this team and never drops out. So I'm holding on to the highest possible upside situation because I think the most likely scenario is that neither of these guys are very valuable for you. So I'm just holding on to the most valuable potential lottery ticket, which is Taimu.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'm gonna put an addition here because I think it's useful for this week specifically, and I don't think it's on any of these other questions. What type of player should you be picking, or should you be getting rid of to pick up AKM this week? And should you even be picking up AKM at all this week?
I think it's okay to pick him up, but I'm only dropping the ADOs that I picked up last week, the IDDQDs that are sitting on my bench. I'm not, I would probably grab AKM over a player like the non-Surefour DPS players for the Los Angeles Gladiators, guys that I know. Surefour. Yeah, you can even, if you really feel strongly about AKM, you can drop Surefour. I wouldn't, because I just think the best path for the Gladiators is permanent Surefour duty. But listen, it's players whose playing time also is far from guaranteed, or guaranteed not to be 100% is probably the way to look at it. Because I don't see AKM getting close to 100%. I see his play time diminishing, not increasing from what we saw this past weekend. But if the meta is Soldier, and it's Soldier 100% of the time, this is wrong, and AKM's going to play, and he's going to play a ton.
Gotcha.
Moving on, we have a question here from Dr. Witz. We'll send this one over to Asmith. I have Bedosin in so many of my leagues. I figured you were absolutely the correct person to ask this one to. But now he isn't getting any playing time. Should I hang on to him or try to trade him?
Look, this is something I feel strongly about. I think you need to hang on to him because I think he is the best flex support on this team. He's better than Hegopin, and I think London hopefully will eventually see the light and start playing him again. But do you run him out and start him? No. But I think you keep him, stash him on your bench, and wait until London sees the light and starts playing him again, because he is the most talented player on this, most talented support player on this team.
I think the first time you tried to say "see the light," you just said "skalite."
Sorry, I slur words sometimes.
I was like trying to figure out if what you said was wrong, or if I heard it wrong, or what happened, but I just had to point it out. I don't know. It's not around the payload. I should have let you go. But Blevins, let's push this one over to you. It's another question from Dr. Witz. Start sit. So we're talking about pick one of the following: Mickey, Fury, not Furry, Mickey, Fury, or Miro.
Oh man, I'm very biased here because I definitely have more Mickey than anything else. For this week, it depends. So here's the stipulation: if you want something consistent, I think you go with Mickey. If you're looking for a splash that could possibly pay off big, or maybe only see half playtime, go with Miro here. We had Miro as a Douse the Flames earlier, and I think that's correct. But the thing about the Douse the Flames is that sometimes you don't have enough water, and or we're dousing the wrong flames, and it's actually a wildfire. And Miro is definitely the type of player that could be a wildfire. So if you already have a good team and you just need to maintain a consistently good team, go with Mickey, because he's going to play. He's going to get you some points. But if you need a Hail Mary, go with Miro here.
Yeah, it's funny. There's this counter. There's Douse the Flames, which we're doing. People are constantly, all fantasy content kind of has a segment like that, like slow your roll or calm down or whatever it is. And then there's also this theory in fantasy football, and it's stay in the flames is what they call it. And that's so when a player is putting together regular, consistent, high performances that don't really make sense, right? And it defies logic, in all honesty. Ride it out. Keep him in there. Just keep going with it. It doesn't need to make sense. It just needs to keep happening. And we're not quite there yet with Miro. So I do kind of like that call of just kind of playing it safe with Mickey. But like you said, if you need that Hail Mary, if you're looking at your opponent and you're going, how am I going to beat that guy? Miro over Mickey might be that answer. So keep it in mind. Asmith, for you, the Monkey Prince wants to know, I have Hagopin. Should I put him in instead of Unco? Okay, so Hago or Unco this week?
Hago, Unco. That's a tough one. Like I said earlier, I think that London will see the light and play Bedozin. But that being said, I'm not convinced they're going to do that. They have Florida and Philly, Florida's going to be a easy clap win, and Philly's going to be a tough one. And whereas Valiant have San Francisco and Dallas, which are better map, I think Unco might actually end up more points here. I say roll out Unco. He's going to give you more consistent points, whereas Hago could be a boomer bust.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing if you didn't get there. Yep. Hago's the Hail Mary play.
Yeah.
Unco, but man, LA really looks like a team that's gone through 3 head coaches in the last 2 months. I'll say that much. So you might want to slow your roll on Unco, but I don't know about that much. I will say one more week of Hago playing will probably get me sold on starting him, and then that will mean Bedozin instantly comes in full time over him again. It seems like as soon as we buy in on London is when we actually have to worry about it. But we'll have to just continue to cross that foggy bridge when we get to it. I'm going to take this next question here, and this one's coming from, I'm going to try to say his name right, and I'm pretty sure it's Bacon Boy. So Neko or Toby here in the starting role, and I'm going to say Toby, locked and loaded, has to be the guy. He looked significantly better. He gets to play the Lucio role, which he's very comfortable in. I think most people, generally speaking, undersold how often Lucio does happen to appear in the kill feed. He shows up a good amount in cleanup, and then you also have those big, huge, like occasionally just two or three boops that just, like, here you go, like just great maps that suddenly Lucio's spike points. And listen, Neko is better if Boston's playing like they were at the end of the stage. But after that shocking performance this week, we can't rely on that. And I think Toby is a much safer start. I think even if I'm needing a Hail Mary, I'm looking elsewhere on my roster for this. I'm not even playing Neko in a Hail Mary scenario. So that's going to lead us into the next question here. I see both of you generally bobbing your heads up and down to my answer there, so I'm assuming you agree with me. So there's a good transition. Is Toby a must start in this meta? This question also from Bacon Boy. Blevins, take it away.
It's tough to answer a question like that. It really depends on your team. I mean, a lot of these questions are like that. I like Asmith's analysis of you want to start your top tier flex supports, then your top tier Lucios, and then your middling flex supports, and then middling Lucios in that order. So is he a must start? No. If you have a stacked support line already, is he a must start if he's, I mean, I don't even know how to, like, it depends on what the composition of your team is entirely. Like, if he's your best support, then yes, because you have to play a support. If it's between Toby and Jonak, like, play Jonak. If it's between Toby, like, he's basically one of the top Lucio players. So are you starting him over any of your top tier flex supports? Probably not. Are you starting him over your middling flex supports? I think so. And he's probably the top start for a Lucio player. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
I think you answered it correctly. There's a lot of options there. Players that you would play above him, but this is a very startable top 10 support player to me. Asmith looks, I mean, he looks like a baby bird. Yeah, he wants to refute us here.
I'll come at it with a different perspective here. Toby was the number 25th overall point scorer this week. Think about that. Number 25 overall point scorer. Regardless of where you're at, I'd start him over some DPS even. He scored more points than Jake. He scored more points than Zumba. He scored more points than Surefour, more points than Dia, Meko, Dream Casper, Jehong, AKM. I mean, he put up a lot of points. And when you're looking at it overall as a whole, it looks like DPS are kind of getting a nerf a little bit in fantasy perspective because we're getting less kills. I think Toby might actually become a must start even over some DPS.
Yeah,
more points than Linkser.
Don't disagree.
Yeah, more points than Linkser.
Don't disagree with that.
More points than Birdring.
Don't
More
disagree
points
with that
than
at all.
Bird.
In my expert league, with the new scoring format that we live drafted, I am sitting on like 4 tanks and like 3 support players, and like now I've only got 1 DPS because one of them was Shadowburn. So like I've got like just Bird Ring. And like I'm not panicking because I just feel like I'm so deep at tank and support that I think I might just be fine. Especially if
you might be low enough to actually get EQO on that.
Yeah, and I was going to say I might even be able to make some acquisitions or something. Like that league's only played 2 weeks. So being 1-1, you're in a fine position to push forward going, you know what I mean, going into the later stage of the season, but at the same time you're low enough you might actually be able to like grab a player and make a move.
I think we're at week 3 in that league, but yeah.
Could be. Yeah. It's really low. But anyways, Asmith, Surefour for closer to pick up on waivers. Are you cutting Surefour to pick up closer from the Spitfire? I know you love Spitfire support players.
You're cutting Surefour for closer. Here's the deal. I already cut Surefour in one of my leagues. Like straight up. I cut him for say a player though, which I just felt like was a better overall, and I had some ridiculous DPS.
Higher upside, I think. Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So, and I wasn't using Surefour. If you're not using Surefour and you need a support player, I think closer could be a good option for you. Like DeathBlow was saying, closer seems like he's going to be the Lucio-esque player for this team. He also has a pretty decent Moira from what I've heard. I didn't watch all the London games completely, so I don't know his complete player role, but I think he's going to be the player to start over Nuss. So in Surefour, still the Gladiators have some poor management with how they're using Surefour, and I think that bodes well for getting closer. I would consider doing it.
Yeah, like I agree 100% with what you said. If you're not planning to use Surefour, and you have a need on your team and closer fills that need, that's all the information you need to know. It can be dependent on your team specifically, 100%. One last question here, and then we're going to sign off for the day. We've got a start-sit question. I'm going to throw it to Blevins. Are you sitting Striker or Dreamcasper to make room for Fissure on your lineup?
So is this, I have to pick one of the two to swap out for Fissure, or do I have to pick whether I do this at all?
I mean, you can do either.
Okay, so for Fissure, ooh, man, I
think you're going to want to find room for one of them because Fissure was like in the top 5 overall. Yeah, like
number 3.
I think the overall answer is yes. You want to play Fissure over one of them. I think just in general, you probably would keep Striker. So I would play Striker and Fissure if I had to choose 2 out of the 3. If it's you're definitely playing Fissure if you have the chance of the 3. I would probably, even if you had to get rid of completely like a trade Striker or Dreamcasper to pick up Fissure, I would probably also do it. I think especially in new scoring format.
This is just a start-sit question. I did check with him.
Yeah. I'm just expounding on it.
Gotcha.
I think the DPS role, like we talked about, unless you're like a top consistently like number 1 overall DPS, you probably want a better you want a good tank over a DPS player anyway.
So you're going with Striker over Dreamcasper to pair with Fissure, correct?
That is my pick, yes.
Okay. I would go the opposite direction. Asmith, I'll let you break the tie.
I would actually go the opposite direction as well. I like Dreamcasper a little better.
Ooh, so we've got some odds here.
We've got the ability to bet on it. We are getting closer to being able to like support these bets. Have we decided on what? Because what we were going to do is the loser of the bet has to wear the winner of the bet's team hat, throughout the duration of the episode.
Involves buying $60
that involves right, like
hats.
spending a lot of money on hats that don't fit me.
I personally like the painting something like the team's logo during the show.
Well, not paint, but why not just put like a little graphic over that, like a little, like I'll have a little like Outlaws or a Fuel thing like up here, like, but just put it on the overlay.
All right, so you've got to root for the winner's
Yeah.
team the next week, even if it's begrudgingly and not by your words and just by what I put over your face on the stream.
I'll put. I will. If I lose, I will wear. You can put both a Houston and a Dallas thing like up here, like my little like angels.
All right, we'll give it a try, and we will let the fans. The only issue I have with that is that the podcast listeners won't care even a little bit. But
I don't think people are going to care that much about it anyway.
Cheer for our teams, though.
Yeah, we don't have a better option yet.
Okay,
regardless,
so we'll put it like this before we go out. If you guys care enough and want to see us get ranched, let us know in Discord what you think is a good way to settle these bets that cost under $60 a person, preferably as free as possible, and something that we can do audio wise.
Yeah, we're very open to ideas, but for the time being, some shows I listen to do things off the air that the listeners don't even get to actually witness unless they go listen to extra content. So this is definitely reasonable. I think there might be a better form out there, but for now, we're gonna put team logos over each other's cameras, depending on who wins and who loses these bets. And Blevins is going to be the first one to take risk. That means you literally have to show up. Blevins, you have to show up next week. All right, but that is going to close out.
Part of the deal when I made the bet.
That is going to put a wrap on this week's episode. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me, as always. Anybody looking to reach out to the show, if you're not in our Discord yet, you're really doing yourself a disservice. It's been a whole lot of fun to hang out in there, especially on match day. Also, you can tweet at us on Twitter at HNP_FOWL play, and also in the description of the YouTube video, in the show notes, everywhere there are links to all of our individual Twitters and social media outlets, and you can always go to highnoonpodcast.com to get those links as well. I am DeathBlow for TheBlevins, for Asmith. Sorry, no fuel. That's gonna wrap things up this week. We will see you guys later.
Got his boots and he put on his hat. Threw the coin away that same day. It's in his past and he's not looking back. He says, finding mine now, God's my way. He's not good, but he sure ain't bad. He'll make amends for the sins that he has. He says, I'll change the world one bullet at a time.